Part 1. Campus. Chapter 1. Gerald. Tuesday, October 20th at 9:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Liam returned to his workshop on the ground floor of Lambeth House to find a demon floating above his workbench. The scaly, horned, gargoyle-looking thing was singing Bodak Yellow. Liam blinked a number of times, as one is wont to do when confronted with a vision of a supernatural being hovering over their volumetric flasks singing Cardi B's 2017 breakout hit. Liam's first thought was that the seals on some of his solvents with higher vapor points had gone bad. Hypothesis number 1. Enclosed within his lab, these chemicals had formed a vapor cloud with psychedelic, dissociative, or both, effects. Liam left the door open to the workshop as he wheeled his bike inside, allowing some fresh air to waft in. This was in an effort to test this hypothesis. Hopefully, a strong draft would clear up this unexpected sensory experience. After a brief check of the seals on all his solvents, acids, and bases, Liam could see that they were all intact. The demon remained, wiggling his butt to the beat, his scaly tail following while he did his best to beatbox along with Cardi. Ian had been flying behind Liam in his dragonfly drone configuration. The AI assistant buzzed through the door, making his way to the top of one of the bookshelves where he hovered over his port before settling down and plugging in to recharge. Liam swung the door back and forth a few times, hoping to pull in a few more gusts of fresh air, then closed it so he could reach the hook hanging from the ceiling behind it. The winch in the rafters let out a low hum as the cable extended. Liam removed the trombone case from the pannier rack of the bike before looping the hook and cable around the bamboo epoxy frame of his bike. He gave the cable a tug. The servos kicked in, winding the bike up and out of the way. With that taken care of, Liam turned back to the demon. It was still there. As demons went, it appeared pretty standard. Gray-green in color with a flattened bulldog face, upturned nose, and a nest of interlocking needle-like fangs. Its ears were floppy and conical, reminiscent of a bat. Its arms, just a bit longer than its stocky legs, were tipped with claws a deep shade of green, a shade of green that matched the stumpy set of horns on either temple and the row of spikes running down the length of the demon's back. The spikes grew smaller until they reached the end of the creature's tail, where they shaded to a more yellowish chartreuse color. The last 3 spikes were larger than the rest. Horns, spikes, and nails all looked to be made of a keratin-like substance. Although the apparition, hallucination, whatever it was, had wings with the graceful curves of scimitar blades, its body lacked any logical biomechanical coherence. The wings, the distribution of weight, it was all impossible aerodynamically speaking, especially when Liam considered the wing's surface area to the volume of the demon's gut, which was ample and rotund enough to make Liam wonder if this was a demon of gluttony or some other related vice or sin. Unless the gut was actually a ballast filled with some type of lighter-than-air substance. Methane, maybe, produced in its gastrointestinal tract by methanogens? Maybe that was how this thing was able to fly. Liam shook his head, chiding himself for going as far as even contemplating that this might be anything other than a hallucination or dream. The demon floated over Liam's tool tray, where Liam had left out his wire strippers and Allen keys. The creature was moving into the 3rd verse of Bodak Yellow, if one could even call it a verse, although it played more like a bridge. It had been Liam's opinion for years now that Cardi B was wildly overrated, including in her latest incarnation of Megan Thee Stallion. Despite the demon's poor choice in music, Liam decided to do what any good scientist would. He took a deep breath to lower his heart rate, cleared his mind, and turned to his powers of objective observation and scientific reasoning. He went through a mental checklist of possibilities, quickly recognizing that he needed to corroborate his data, since his senses, in their current state, could not be trusted.
Ian, are you picking up any unusual chemical vapors that would indicate broken seals?
No, sir, Mr. Liam, Ian said. Now that the AI assistant was settled in his port, his voice emanated from the speakers placed throughout the workshop. Ian was even-toned and calm in his objectivity. His voice had only the slightest hint of a British accent in its electronic warble. "But the mics are picking up an unidentified voice in the laboratory." "Other than my voice?" "Yes." Liam's heart began to race again. He wondered if even Ian's voice just then had been a hallucination, which would complicate collecting corroborating data through the AI assistant. "Mr. Liam, your pulse rate is elevated, even for just having ridden your bike across campus from the marina. Are you feeling all right?" "No, Ian, I most certainly am not. If I may provide additional data, sir, the cameras are picking up no readings in the visible spectrum or infrared. Readings on the chemical filters are normal, and the motion sensors detect only you. However, the dark matter array is picking up anomalous signals." "That is interesting." Liam had forgotten about the DMA. It was in the trombone case in his hand. They had just been testing it down at the marina. Ian was still linked up to it. Liam set his father's last, mysterious invention atop the workbench. The trombone case, his mother's, was still covered in campaign and protest stickers from the 2000s and 2010s. The stickers ran from the high-minded, "Yes, we can," and "Out of many one," to the less polished but more strident, "Resist," and "Keep your tiny hands off my pussy." They included the iconic shepherd fairy portraits of President Barack Obama, circa 2007, the triptych of 3 women of color from 2017, We Are the Future from 2018, Believe Survivors from 2019, and even a few knockoffs of migrant children locked behind red bars with the phrase, "Close the camps," the bars themselves forming a ghostly American flag. As Liam stared at the political stickers, he felt a familiar stirring of emotions he didn't want to deal with just then, especially now when he might be losing his mind. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes and dropped into his swivel chair. It rolled out and away from his desk. "Fudge sticks, Ian. We need an outside observer. I can—" But Liam didn't finish his sentence. The demon, now fluttering around the row of ring stands and burets on the workbench, had finally taken notice of Liam. The creature's scaly eyebrows arched, and his teeth popped apart in what Liam could only interpret as a smile. His wings flared, and he came down for a landing, perched on his coiled tail atop Liam's writing desk. "Oh, well, you are here. I didn't hear you come in," the demon said in a gravelly but chipper voice. He covered his mouth with his fist as he cleared his throat. Liam was certain now he was losing his mind. But there wasn't much more to do than to let the hallucination play out. He continued to stare wordlessly at the apparition. "Let me introduce myself," the demon said. Liam pressed himself into the back of his chair, wishing now that he had designed it with an ejection function, or at least the option to recline. He wanted to put as much distance between himself and this thing, this situation. Hypothesis number 2, I am having a psychotic break. The chair came to a stop as Liam rolled it backward up against his writing desk. This was as far as he could get. Unfortunately, the demon didn't pick up on the hint and floated closer. The demon put his fist to his mouth once more, nails clicking against one another as he cleared his throat a second time. He turned his head to the side as if out of politeness. He placed his other hand on his puffed-out chest, presumably where his heart would have been, although it seemed more an effort to distract from how he tried to suck in his gut. His throat fully cleared, the demon continued, this time with added pomp. "I am Narvicius Skelgrim Gorgonzola Grimold Maximus the Terrible, spawn of Magnus Nightshade the Hideous, scion of the Dread House of Flayers, progeny of the Dark Order of the Nocturnal Succubi, fully pledged member of the 5th rank of the Dreadnoughts of Splinter Spleen, keeper of the Plague of Babylon and the Pox of Ezerdown, honorary regent of the Scepter of Sheol and steward of the Doomsday Tome." Liam blinked. The demon extended his hand as if to shake. "But you can call me Gerald." Gerald was all Liam could say, although he was pretty sure he had also heard Gorgonzola in that litany of names and titles which otherwise were nonsense to him. His own hands remained in place, his fingers curled, his nails digging into the armrests. "Mr. Liam, cross-referencing the House of Flayers, the Scepter of Sheol, and the Doomsday Tome," Ian said. These all appear to be artifacts which occur in occult literature and non-canonical Christian Gospels, such as the Gospel of Nicodemus and the Apocalypse of Paul. These writings, dating from the 2nd century CE, were categorized as apocryphal by the Catholic Church at the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. "What an interesting automaton," Gerald said, his yellow cat eyes turning to the upper corners of the room, where Ian's sensor arrays and speakers hung. Gerald dug a nail into one of his ears. Liam winced, anticipating him picking out a wad of hairy wax or whatever grotesque things waited in the ears of gargoyle-looking demons. But instead, Gerald plucked out an Apple AirPod. Hypothesis number 3. I'm dreaming. That's it. I must be dreaming. I am not an automaton, Ian clarified for the visitor. I am an advanced, artificially intelligent personal assistant. You may call me Ian, which is an acronym for Enhanced Information Analysis Neural Network. Liam was somewhat encouraged that Ian could interact with this manifestation at all. It provided evidence to support the hypothesis that Liam was not dreaming, nor was he losing his mind. Hypothesis number 4, maybe this thing, Gerald, is real. Real as such things could be. After all, the whole world had recently witnessed proof that the supernatural was not necessarily fanciful. The massive zombie outbreak in East Africa 2 years prior had given scientists, theologians, not to mention everyday people, reason enough to reevaluate long-held assumptions about reality. But Liam was fixated now on a particular incongruity in Gerald's appearance. While it was indeed Cardi B blasting out of his now dislodged AirPod, the device it was connected to was an old-style 1980s Sony Walkman, its corner hanging out of a partially zipped fanny pack slung around Gerald's girthy midsection. Why are you listening to a Walkman connected to AirPods in a fanny pack? That makes no sense. Gerald pointed a curved talon at the pack. Isn't this what all you youth are listening to these days? Maybe in 1989. Right, silly me. It's hard to keep track of these things, when you get past 6 millennia old. How is this? Gerald snapped his fingers and the Walkman morphed into a first-generation iPod. For a moment, Gerald's features darkened so that he was a complete silhouette. He danced, a black shadow with only the iPod, its white wire running up to the white earbuds lodged in his ears. He crooned out the words to U2's 2004 single, Vertigo. Liam realized he had seen videos on YouTube like this, the first television ads for iPods, black silhouettes wearing white wires and earbuds dancing against backgrounds of bright primary colors. Maybe in 2005, you were better off with AirPods. The inky blackness dissolved, and Gerald morphed back into 3 dimensions. By the expression on his face, he must have realized his miscalculation. The demon waved his hand, and the clunky old-school iPod, wire, earbuds, and all, vanished. Ian, what is the number for campus counseling services? I can dial them at your request. No, you are not hallucinating, Gerald said. Then maybe I should call a priest for an exorcism? Would you like me to call the campus priest, Mr. Liam? Ian asked. Gerald snorted, raising an eyebrow. Young boy like you? How old are you, 13? 15, Liam corrected. Can take your own chances with them, Gerald huffed. Liam expected a Catholic priest joke to follow. Instead, the demon settled down, his tail uncoiling so he could sit closer to Liam's level on the edge of the desk. Gerald spread out his hands, the fingers with their nails or talons, whatever they were, splayed apart. The demon started again. I assure you I am real. Well, as real as I can be on this plane of existence. Here, look, your little electronic friend can see me now. Ian? Goodness, Mr. Liam, I am now registering a shape in the vicinity where you are looking. Cross-referencing its shape and appearance, it does indeed correspond to catalogued images of cathedral gargoyles and other grotesqueries. Gerald crossed his arms. What an offensive word choice. Grotesqueries. Your talking appliance there could use some manners. Gargoyles and grotesqueries of a cartoonish nature, that is, Ian continued. Cartoonish? Cartoonish?
Gerald shouted. "I am a demon with a fierce visage, terrible to behold, robed in great power." Gerald began to flap his wings and turn in a circle, snarling and hissing as he looked about the room, seeking something, anything that represented Ian, in order to direct his irritation. Liam suppressed a laugh, cutting it off with his own fist to his mouth, as if clearing his own throat. "Might I add," Ian's voice continued, effortlessly dialing up his volume to drown out Gerald's threats, "I am no mere appliance, but a self-teaching, self-learning neural network." "I'll show you, neural," Gerald said, shaking a fist. But he abandoned his threat as Liam began talking to himself. "I know what happened. I got into a bike wreck, hit my head. I'm in a coma now. At least I hope so, because if I am dead and this is the afterlife, that would be deeply disappointing." No, Gerald said, gliding down again. "Let me tell you, this planet may be a dump, but it is not one of the afterlives." "Or my winch hook failed and my bike fell on my head." But with a glance toward the door, Liam saw that the bike was in place, the hook intact. "If it fell and hit me on the head, in my dream, of course I'd see it there." "I assure you this is not a dream, young man." "I just need to wake up," Liam said, ignoring Gerald and beginning to get up. "I just need to find something to kill myself with. You can't die in a dream, so that will wake me up." Now both Gerald and Ian were speaking at once, suddenly on the same page, discouraging this course of action. No, that isn't a good idea, young man. Mr. Liam, sir, I am recording this so we can review all the data later. I assure you such a course of action would be ill-advised." Gerald leaned forward to ease Liam back down into his chair, his claws retracting so he could lightly touch Liam's shoulders and even pat him on the head once he took his seat again. He certainly felt real. Liam reflected on the demon's touch, grateful Gerald had retracted those claws first. "Now I know this is all very disconcerting, but grant me a moment to explain," Gerald begged. Liam took a deep breath, considering he had already given the demon numerous opportunities to do exactly that, but something kept coming up. It seemed one or both of them was suffering from a case of ADHD. But Gerald's brow was furrowed now with focus. "As you know, young man, you do live in a changing world these days, eh? Everything from magic to matter being rethought. Am I right? Mr. Liam, you might be interested to know that the dark matter array is picking up a presence of neutrinos in amounts that are completely inexplicable." "Neutrinos?" Liam repeated, leaning forward, studying Gerald more closely. From the smirk on the demon's face, Liam could tell Gerald was pleased with himself, having successfully piqued Liam's interest. "Ian, can you detect the spin of—" "I'll save you some time," Gerald interrupted. "I can expend some energy in order to interact with the baryonic matter of your world, but it comes at a cost to me. See, those of us on the spiritual plane, as you might call it, consist mainly of scalar particles and neutrinos still unknown to your scientists, although through history a few alchemists, conjurers, and sorcerers have dabbled around the edges of these branches of physics." "You're made of sterile neutrinos, or right-handed, never-detected-before neutrinos," Liam said, making the connection, his eyes widening with the implications. "Indeed," Gerald said, waving a finger, a game show host rewarding a point. "With some axions thrown in too, but your people have yet to pin one of those down. You will need to crack quaternions and then octonions first." "Which are non-commutative and non-associative," Liam said, his mind racing. "But as far as you need to be concerned right now, in this form, my essence is as solid as you," Gerald said, reaching out to poke Liam in the shoulder again. The demon had let slip a claw point. "Ow! Careful," Liam said, scooting backward, realizing belatedly how close he had rolled his chair to the demon in his onset of curiosity. "So sorry," Gerald said, his ears pointing up with embarrassment. He retracted his claw. "Tell your enhanced neurotic network, enhanced information analysis neural network," Ian corrected, his tone decidedly snippy. "That was what I said, moronic network, right? Anyway, tell him to keep recording and stay linked up to that DMA thingy. You'll have some intriguing readings to sort through after all this." Gerald settled on the writing desk once more, rocking back and forth on his bottom.
He rested a hand on each knee, doing his best to imitate the voice of a milquetoast but friendly high school guidance counselor. A pair of tortoiseshell glasses appeared on his face, as well as a pocket protector on his chest, although it had no pocket to be anchored to. It was clear he was trying. "Ian?" Liam asked. "Recording, sir." "All right then, Mr. Gerald. Tell your story. I'm listening." "Yes, with pleasure. Wait!" The demon's pupils dilated, and his mouth hung open as something across the room came into his focus. "Are those Cheez-Its?" Chapter 2. Cardi versus Nikki. Cheez-Its? But Gerald was already gone, zipping across the workshop like an oversized bumblebee. He hovered in front of the shelf where Liam kept his groceries, a mix of breakfast cereals, granola bars, beef jerky, and the aforementioned Cheez-Its. Gerald snatched the Cheez-It box up in his claws, letting out a satisfied laugh when he shook the box and found it more than half full. He pointed a dark green nail at the box, then his belly, by way of asking if he might help himself. Liam had barely nodded before the demon had torn into the box and was munching down on the savory squares. Gerald floated back across the workshop, presumably to resume his pending explanation, a scaly olive and chartreuse rain cloud showering down ochre crumbs as he went. Ian activated the workshop's Roomba. "Your selection looked limited, but this has certainly redeemed you. I didn't see any real cheese. You even have a refrigerator in this place?" "I'm never getting an explanation at this rate." "Not for food," Liam said. "I tend not to spend a lot of time cooking." He wanted to mention that he did heat up soup over a Bunsen burner when he felt like something hot, but then he wondered why he was letting himself be distracted by talk of cooking. Gerald owed him an explanation, especially now that he was inhaling Liam's last box of Cheez-Its. "So, you like Cheez-Its?" Liam made little effort to disguise the impatience building his voice. "Even a primitive society gets lucky sometimes," Gerald said. Liam noted how ill-suited the demon's fangs were for snack foods, now that the rain shower had turned into a blizzard of crumbs settling on the floor beneath him. Not that this slowed Gerald. His fondness really couldn't be overstated. There was that mention of Gorgonzola in his series of titles, Liam reflected. "Looks like you're out," Gerald said, after shaking the last crumbs into his gaping maw and tossing the empty box over his shoulder. It bounced off the Roomba and fell to the floor. "I am now. I'll have Ian add it to the grocery list," Liam said. "Glad that apparatus serves some use," Gerald said, his mouth full. Liam clapped his hands together as Gerald smacked and licked his lips, chewing with his mouth open. "Hey, demon, weren't you going to tell me what you're doing here? Who you are, enlighten me on the nexus of all things spiritual and physical, blowing my mind with Nobel Prize-worthy insight into the laws of the universe and undiscovered revelations into particle physics?" "And all things seen and unseen," Gerald intoned, priest-like, before laughing and spitting Cheez-It crumbs onto his belly. "None of that, Bubba. Your brain would explode, and there are guidelines on how much demons can tell corporeal beings. The restrictions are even higher for primitive planets like this one." "Primitive, eh?" "You going to argue that point?" Gerald asked, a single eyebrow raised. Liam might have done just that, using Gerald's less-than-refined table manners as Exhibit A, but he restrained himself. There were things he wanted to learn. "I've just served you the last of my Cheez-Its, which is apparently the most valuable technological offering my culture can make. Who knew? So how about some quid pro quo here?" Yes, of course. Ahem." Gerald brushed his hands together, scattering more crumbs, Liam finally having prevailed upon him to begin his explanation. "You might not realize it, but you are a very lucky young man." Something about Gerald's tone, shifting from high school guidance counselor to carnival barker, triggered Liam's skepticism. He felt his face flush, but kept his indignation to himself. "Go on."
You have been chosen, granted the privilege, the honor of a supernatural companion, a guide, a comrade, a familiar in the folk tale sense of the word.
Like a lab assistant? Gerald growled, his teeth gnashing, his spikes standing on end. Although the demon opened his mouth, likely to object, Ian jumped in over the loudspeaker. Mr. Liam already has an assistant. The snippiness in the AI's voice had developed into a full-on haughtiness that Liam didn't know Ian was capable of. Liam noticed the evolution of Ian's affect, and perhaps his consciousness, with pride. He opted to add nothing to Ian's observation, allowing the statement to stand. Gerald ran a hand over his spikes to smooth them back down.
Well, yes, like your Anema Intrusion Analysis Network says.
Enhanced Information Analysis Neural, Ian began to correct again.
Yes, whatever that name was, Gerald said with a wave of his hand. As your electronic friend said, you already have an assistant. Think of me more like a helpful guide, in the tradition of Virgil in Dante's Inferno.
Are you taking me to hell?
No. Maybe that is not the best reference.
Gerald backpedaled. I'll say. Mr. Liam, would you like me to read you the Wikipedia entry on psychopomp, derived from the Greek word psychopompos, which translates as a guide for souls?
Psychopomp? Oh, yada,
Gerald huffed, his eyes searching in vain once more for something of Ian he could fix his irritation at. Not right now, Ian, Liam said, trying to interrupt the two non-human entities from provoking each other further. But I do like that word. Great find, Ian. Now, Gerald, please continue.
Well,
Gerald said, brushing a few more crumbs from the scales of his neck.
With all due respect to your mechanical friend, what I have to offer is far more unique.
I would like to add that, due to the nature of my programming, I am capable of self-directed and experience-based learning. I am quite unique myself, Ian added, and I grow more unique with every learning experience. Gerald's nostrils flared, his teeth grinding. Liam bit his lower lip.
Didn't I say with all due respect?
Gerald grumbled before directing his attention once more to Liam. Your vocal intonation and resonant harmonics would indicate a degree of sarcasm in your earlier statement, which is not beyond my capacity to detect, Ian said. Noticing how Gerald's ears flattened, his spikes rose again, and his hand curled into a fist, Liam decided to intervene. Thanks, Ian. Let's allow Gerald the floor here. Absolutely, as you wish, Mr. Liam, Ian said, in a clear attempt to demonstrate how his own cooperative nature was superior to Gerald's.
Thank you,
Gerald rolled his eyes. Liam was grateful Ian did not rush to point out the level of sarcasm in Gerald's last statement as well.
Credit is due to you both, young man, for what you and your assistant have accomplished on your own already. Perhaps what I offer might be a compliment to your pre-existing partnership.
That's big of you. I'm listening.
Well, like I said, you are a bit of a winner, one might say, of the cosmic sweepstakes.
Because I'm an orphan?
Orphan?
Gerald stammered, followed by an awkward cough. Or because I am a mixed-race geek? Too white and nerdy to be cool for the black kids, but despite the green eyes, my skin is too dark, my hair too nappy, and my lips too full for me to hang with the white kids without me being their token.
Well, I'm not completely versed in the ethnic identities and racial tensions of your society. Maybe that was in the briefing I was supposed to read.
Or maybe because I'm a poor ward of the university, at a school full of entitled rich white kids in a boondocks college town where half the people over 60 wore pillowcases on their heads back in the day, and now they've replaced them with red caps that say, "Make America Great Again."
Definitely should have read that briefing, Gerald said, pulling on his lip.
What briefing? What are you? You still haven't told me what you're doing here, Liam said, his voice rising. Why a Walkman? Why Cheez-Its? Why Cardi B, for God's sake? That song doesn't have a decent hook or a real chorus.
I see I've struck a nerve,
Gerald said. Liam shrugged. Just more of a Nikki fan, he said, settling back into his swivel chair. Say what you want about her attitude. Homegirl has got talent. Gerald sighed in agreement. The exhalation deflated him, his bravado fading. In an even, matter-of-fact voice, the demon said, Let me try again. I am a sentient being who, in my natural state, exists as a form of dark matter. What your people at this stage in their evolution would call a spirit or a demon. So, not a hallucination, symptomatic of a psychotic break? Correct. I can guarantee that. And as you see, I've been encouraged here to be with you to help you. Encouraged? Yes, assigned, really, Gerald said, looking away. Had he a collar, he would have been tugging at it. Why me? Why now? Well, it could be for any number of reasons, Gerald said, clapping his hands. Let me guess, it was in the brief you didn't read? Gerald snapped his fingers, and a hefty 3-ring binder with no less than 24 tabbed dividers appeared in the air and fell into his outstretched palms. Despite the modern Office Depot look of the binder, it was sealed shut with an ancient-looking iron clasp. It was etched with arcane runes and pictograms Liam couldn't decipher. Gerald frowned upon seeing it. Oh, yes, that was why I hadn't read it. Don't know why the authorities put these on there. So offensive, really. Defeats the purpose. Gerald turned the binder in his hands so the clasp faced Liam. The binder had to be over 4 inches thick, with layers of 3-hole punched paper. For something that had just appeared out of nowhere, it looked surprisingly solid. Liam caught the scent of old vellum pages and a whiff of the oxidation from the iron clasp. Gerald gave the binder a shake. The clasp? Liam asked. Yes, would you mind? Sure, Liam said, leaning forward to unlatch the strange binder. The iron clasp unlocked easily, and the pages folded open. Gerald settled back onto the desktop and crossed his legs. His tortoise-shell glasses returned, perched on the end of his upturned nose. Liam noticed that as the demon flipped through the pages, he kept his hands far away from the metal rings and, most of all, the iron clasp. You can't touch metal? What? Oh, well, not that we can't, Gerald said, giving the latch the tiniest of pokes with the very tip of one of his nails. He recoiled upon contact, reminding Liam of a sorority girl who had just touched a bag of dog poo. See? I touched it, Gerald shivered. He went back to skimming the pages. Those higher-order demons and governing spirits, all those muckety-mucks pretend to forget that the majority of us don't do well around lower-level elements. Pretend? Pretend, because I think it's an intentional insult on their part to remind us of our place. Gerald took a deep breath, in through his fangs, out through those wide nostrils. This was a clear source of consternation for the demon. He was still muttering as he flipped the pages. Liam felt things coming together now. So, you were sent here? Gerald looked up over his reading glasses. Assigned? By whom? Well, that is interesting. There is a committee. A committee? Liam said, recognizing that he wasn't going to get much further without some directed inquiries. He decided to take a more aggressive approach to his questioning. A committee of what? Where? It's part of the SAS, Gerald said, turning pages. The British Secret Assassin Service? No. Although we have been known to do the occasional assassination, but I digress. You don't say. That seems to be a thing with you. Gerald arched an eyebrow. In this case, the SAS stands for the Supreme Authority of the Supernatural. He straightened, as if to deflect Liam's barb. You see, even the spirit realm has its own bureaucracy. Force of nature, bureaucracy is. It's like the 5th fundamental force. Gerald sighed, flipping more pages. This SAS is full of a lot of pretentious ghosts, ghouls, and spirits vying for status. Some say they have a purpose, although most days I'm not sure what it is. Gerald had a definite penchant for the tangential, but Liam was beginning to suspect the demon was dancing around something he didn't want to reveal. Some of what Gerald was sharing aligned with the recent developments in the world, such as the East African zombie outbreak. But whether or not that was just information that had seeped into Liam's unconscious to manifest in the dream/hallucination, he was still trying to figure out. The only way to find out was to gather more data. That meant keeping Gerald talking. Liam decided it was time to lead with more direct questions. So, this SAS and the committee, what's their role? Well, the committee in question is the Karma and Discipline Committee, the KDC. Wait, why do you want to know? Gerald asked, growing suspicious. He snapped the binder shut and set it aside on the desk, where it disappeared in a puff of smoke. Well, you said they assigned you, to me of all people. I'd like to know why, Liam said, leaning back in his chair and placing his elbows on the armrest. He didn't want to appear too eager. Yes, you see, the KDC, their raison d'etre, is to manage the karmic balance. They monitor the role of demons, demigods, spirits, and other phantasms the universe over, ensuring that we maintain the proper balance of the creative and destructive forces. Entropy, order, blessings, boons, curses, hexes, blah, blah, blah. They keep a track record on everyone. So you said you're here to help me? Is that what I said? Gerald said unconvincingly. I can replay the recording for you, sir, Ian offered, the AI reminding them of his presence. Ian didn't like to seem unhelpful any more than he liked the idea of being replaced. Not necessary right now, but thank you, Ian. I remember the phrase helpful guide well enough. Liam sat up in his seat. So if you're here to help, Gerald, and I'd like to think that I am not an evil scientist bent on world domination, and you already have wings, so you're not an angel trying to earn them to get into heaven. I am no angel, Gerald said, growing huffy, as if grievously insulted. So boring and pretentious. Angels? Yes, such four-faced prigs, Gerald said, folding his arms, shaking his head, and turning up his chin. All right, sorry. So you're a demon with a fierce visage, as you said. Liam tried to keep a straight face. Gerald's chest swelled, his chin lifting ever more. Liam decided to test his growing hunch. So, you're here as punishment? Probation! Gerald shouted, his glasses slipping right off his face. They poofed out of existence before hitting the floor, while Gerald attempted to compose himself, clearing his throat and smoothing his spikes once again. Sorry, probation. And no doubt a miscarriage of justice, Liam said, leading Gerald once more. A histrionic overcorrection, if you ask me. Sounds like it. A moral outrage. Tell me about it, Liam asked, trying on the most sympathetic look he could manage. I am glad you asked, Gerald said, rubbing his palms together, warming to the opportunity. You see, there is this planet, Silesies Antroni. It orbits around a red dwarf star your people call Kepler 147985 KB. It's a rocky planet, habitable, more massive than Earth, tidally locked, deeper gravity well, so their civilizations have never been spacefaring. But the most recent civilization, the Grand Mortmont they call themselves, they were fairly advanced, stratified, hierarchical, and with enough understanding of the spiritual realm to be dangerous. They were advanced, Liam said, noting the past tense. Gerald's shoulders lifted nearly to his ears. Ah, yes, well, there are these Jandy X-Lars, sort of like wizards or magicians. They figured out how to summon demons like myself. They make slaves of us to do all sorts of petty tasks, often taking revenge, making war on their rivals and enemies. These Jandy X-Lars are actually quite a thin-skinned bunch, always taking umbrage and forcing us demons to lay the groundwork for elaborate vendettas that they are too unimaginative to conceive of themselves. Summoned? Yes, and thankfully the art of that lore has been mostly lost to history on this planet. No telling what a mess you all would make of things. Liam decided to let the insult pass. It was merely a distraction. He steered Gerald back to what had been proving to be a richer vein of inquiry. So the Jandiax Lars, they enslaved you? Sounds barbaric.
It was, and this one particular Jandiax Lars, Rolf the Omnipotent, had summoned me and kept me in this realm against my will, doing all sorts of undignified missions that I don't even wish to recall.
Liam had a sense that Gerald really did want to recall, especially if it provided an opportunity to extol his own cleverness, but Liam wanted to avoid that tangent too for now.
So, this Rolf, he kept you there? You couldn't revert back to your natural form? No, a summoner can call us forth, forcing us into this state of baryonic matter. In doing so, we are locked into this plane. We are not creatures of quarks and fermions. As dark matter, we don't interact much with your plane. When we do, it requires energy for us. And since energy is matter, we dwell too long in this plane, well, our essence dwindles and we expire.
Really?
A small detail that most summoners are more than happy to disregard, Gerald said, crossing his arms. They consider us beneath them and expendable.
That does sound pretty awful, Liam said, sincere. Weirdly, all of what Gerald was saying did fit with the growing understanding of particle physics and quantum mechanics, with many well-respected scientists coming to the conclusion that, if all subatomic particles, discovered and undiscovered, existed in a state of all possible states at once, an observer or observers were required for the probable states to collapse into reality. But collapsing these infinite probable states required the act of observation. But only an infinite being could perceive all those possibilities, an unending number of mathematical wave functions. Militantly agnostic and even atheist scientists had found themselves stumbling into the notion that there had to be some sentient observer or observers that humans had yet to comprehend. Observers who could see all these possible states, thus allowing the universe to exist. Or maybe humans had comprehended them in the shape of spirits, demons, and gods. The way science and mysticism had intersected at the center of the East African zombie outbreak a few years prior had only confirmed these theories. That would also explain why Ian was recording such strange readings on the dark matter array. Liam refocused on Gerald. His interest was growing.
I've lost many a friend to just such a fate, the demon was saying, used up by some summoner for inane egotistical schemes until there is nothing left. It's no way for an intelligent being to meet their end.
No, not at all, Liam said, feeling real sadness that even such creatures of spirit could be so mortal and fragile, and that another being could treat them as expendable.
So, as you can imagine, the relationship between enslaver and enslaved is an adversarial one, Gerald continued. Some summoners in a few societies have learned to coexist with us, and it can be a relationship of mutual benefit. But more than a few are like the Jandiax Lars. They will use us up until we are nothing, and in turn, we will do everything in our power to sabotage their efforts. It is simply understood that when you summon a demon, you assume a certain amount of personal risk.
That sounds reasonable. So what happened with this Rolf the Omnipotent?
I'm glad you asked. You see, he demanded that I make his, well, I guess you might call her his daughter, but that is a bit misleading because the Entrani reproduce asexually and don't have the same notions of gender.
I sense this is a tangent, Liam said, growing more confident, redirecting the demon.
Quite right. Well, old Rolf ordered me to conjure an enchantment, if you will. Really, what you all would call magic for us is just the manipulation of the stuff of our existence, which, without a super collider the size of your solar system, you can't even detect.
Clarke's third law. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Indeed. Who is this Clarke fellow? He sounds wise.
Let's finish the first thread, Liam insisted. So Rolf wanted you to perform an enchantment for his daughter. Liam made air quotes around daughter for Gerald's sake.
Yes, to make her immortal. But old Rolf had overreached a bit. To protect himself, a summoner must summon us correctly and be careful to put up safeguards against our more dangerous powers. If they haven't, it's just understood that it is within our rights to rebel. And certainly if we are not able to rebel outright, we will do our best to cause our enslavers mischief.
Yes, you mentioned that.
It's just the rules of the game.
The assumption of reasonable risk.
Correct. An occupational hazard they all know full well.
So, this wizard had you improperly bound.
Old Rolliff had me locked down proper. It was impossible for me to cause any harm to him. He'd enacted all the standard protections around himself. He wasn't unskilled, but his mistake was assuming the protections would also apply to his daughter. They didn't.
A serious oversight.
The old man was slipping in his age, Gerald said with a flick of his wrist. So when he ordered me to extend my powers to his daughter to alter her form into something immortal, I fulfilled his wishes, as best I could, within the tragic confines her father had given me.
What did you do?
Well, what's more immortal than being petrified, specifically into a fossilized lump of Ungarimoth dung? Gerald chuckled to himself. That didn't sit well with the old man.
Ungarimoth?
A sort of, large invertebrate native to Silesia Zentroni that is a bit like a tardigrade, but the size of an elephant, that eats the feces of a humani squab, a sort of amphibious whale with hair and tentacles that lives in the intermedial zone between the day and night sides of that planet.
You turned his daughter into the poop of an animal that eats another animal's poop.
Poetic, I thought.
Wow, was all Liam could offer. What happened next?
Well, instead of dismissing me, Rolliff wanted to punish me.
Of course.
But with more than the usual bolts of lightning or arcs of plasma.
Those are the same thing.
I was just testing you.
Uh-huh.
So, well, Rolliff called his son, but not really his son per se.
I know, asexual reproduction and all.
Yes, very good. Using my powers, Rolliff tried to make me turn his son into a being that could destroy me.
Interesting choice.
But in his agitation, Rolliff made the very miscalculation I was trying to push him toward all along. I complied with Rolliff's wishes. I turned his son into such a Zandifisard metamosaic arg.
These names.
Your language is woefully inefficient. Be glad I used the short version, minus the frequencies that would likely burst your eardrums.
Consider me grateful.
A Zandifisard metamosaic arg is a being, thankfully non-existent in this galaxy cluster, that could indeed destroy me.
Gerald was pausing for effect. But...
Well, they are notoriously hard to control, and the first thing his newly transformed son decided to devour was his poor father.
Oh, my.
Maybe he was angry his father hadn't thought to make him immortal too. I don't know, sibling rivalry. But with Rolliff devoured and dead, I was released from my binding to return, finally, to my natural state and home plane of existence.
Sounds like you were just trying to protect yourself.
Exactly. It was self-defense.
Sure, but you were a bit of a cheeky imp in doing so. Gerald inflated with a sharp intake of breath. Liam realized he had inadvertently insulted his guest again.
How dare you? I am no imp goblin or hobgoblin. I am a scion of the dread House of Flayers, progeny of the Dark Order of the Nocturnal Succubae, fully pledged member of the 5th rank of the Dreadnoughts of Splinter Spleen.
Sorry, I misspoke. Just a figure of speech, really. I didn't mean to insult.
In occult lore, Mr. Liam, there are indeed ranks and orders of malevolent beings, Ian said, choosing this moment to cut in. On the malign side, imps are considered a lower order, just below all manner of goblins. Gerald crossed his arms and folded his wings into an X. First thing your apidal narcolepsy network has said that I agree with. Maybe I am beginning to like him. I was attempting to be helpful to Mr. Liam. I certainly was not offering justification for your display of indignation. Mr. Liam clearly meant no disrespect in his comments.
Quite the contrary. The timbre of his voice would indicate some admiration, even praise for the cunning nature of your escape. Liam realized that even Ian had determined that appealing to Gerald's ego was a surefire tactic for keeping him focused. It was cunning, Gerald agreed with Ian for a second time. Maybe I could learn to like this assistant. Your indignation is still quite unreasonable, Ian added. Never mind, you exasperating, irritating, asinine, nitpicking nag. I really meant no harm with the imp comment, Liam said, before the AI and demon came to blows, if that were even possible within the standard model of particle physics given their radically different states of matter. Fine. Apology accepted. But you should do some research with your friend there before speaking de manière improvisée. I think the most direct translation for the French would be off the cuff. Thanks, Ian, Liam said, hoping to get back to whatever happened to Kepler 147985KB, as he was certain what transpired there was the why of Gerald's assignment. The planet. What happened? Gerald returned to the cross-legged pose of storyteller, his umbrage melting away suspiciously fast. Well, Zandy Fissard Metamosaic Arg are highly dangerous, and admittedly, I had not given my plan much forethought beyond simply escaping. Self-defense, if you remember. I remember. But there were some unforeseen and unintended outcomes. Liam offered a sympathetic shrug. Happens to the best of us. What went down? Gerald's shoulders nearly reached his horns once more, his ears folded down like a penitent puppy caught peeing on the rug. Just the eensy-weensy issue of the complete extinction of all life on the planet. Complete extinction? Even Liam couldn't hold back his shock. Gerald held his fingers a centimeter or two apart, his eyelids lowered, his wings and tail folding close to his body. Yes, just the tiniest of miscalculations. I'd call a planetary genocide more than the tiniest of miscalculations. Gerald dropped his head, staring at the floor. Well, technically, it wasn't a single genocide, but many, as the Zandy Fissard Metamosaic Arg isn't exactly discriminating in its appetites, and there were a number of species wiped out. How many? All of them, Gerald said in a small voice. Liam was dumbstruck. When he had nothing to say, Gerald resumed with a shrug and a sigh. And that was why the Karma and Discipline Committee became involved. Apparently, a planet-wide extinction event tips the karmic scales a bit too far in the mischief and mayhem direction. Mischief and mayhem seem like a bit of an understatement. Gerald pushed on. As even your people have managed to grasp, we need all forces, creative and destructive, for the continued unfolding of the cosmos. It's sort of the beauty of it, really. Even the forces of destruction ultimately contribute to creation and vice versa. In keeping with many religious traditions, Ian interjected. Exactly, Gerald said with a nod to one of the speakers, as if that was where Ian was physically, even though the AI ran off a stack of servers humming away in a climate-controlled cabinet on the opposite end of the room. So you upset the balance, Liam said, doing his best to return to the level of professional objectivity that his role of interrogator called for. Yes, tipped the scales a bit too far from magnanimity to malevolence. At least that was the conclusion of the committee. So they sent you here to atone? To do something positive? It appears so, Gerald said, his finger raised and his body floating up like a mylar balloon. All he needed was a light bulb to appear over his head. At this point, considering the demon's penchant for theatricality, Liam almost expected it. But you don't know what it is. Gerald descended back down to the desktop. No, I'm afraid not. The demon rallied quickly, though, scampering to his feet. But maybe it's to make you look cool. You know, make more friends and influence people, increase your social standing. How? Well, maybe through celebrity. Gerald snapped his fingers, and he turned into the utterly convincing doppelganger of former President Barack Obama, speaking with the president's voice, cadence, and mannerisms. It was disturbingly and uncannily real. "You could be the big man on campus after being seen kicking it with 44, Barack Gerald said. "That may be too much of a stretch."
"Maybe more sex appeal, then."
Gerald morphed into the aforementioned Nicki Minaj in her full space-themed bikini glory. Nicki Gerald pushed down her pair of sunglasses and, in a sexy Nicki Minaj voice, said, "I like how you said you a Team Nicki and not Team Cardi, handsome." Liam swallowed. As a 15-year-old boy, he would have been lying if he said a portion of his mind didn't wonder at the possibilities of a Nicki doppelganger, but he was unable to erase the gargoyle version of the demon already seared in his memory. Plus, Liam couldn't help but think that Gerald's atonement for a planetary extinction event was likely something more noble than the salacious thoughts that had just flashed through his head. Liam did his best to pretend to be unimpressed by this manifestation of Nicki. "I'm really, ultimately, more of a Janelle Monáe fan, anyway." Gerald morphed into the slightly more diminutive but no less glamorous form of Janelle Monáe, quickly cycling through a series of outfits and ensembles from her appearances in films, music videos, and tours.
"I'm quite the fan of hers, too,"
Gerald Janelle said of himself.
"Really?" "Yeah, but before you get too invested, Miss Monáe ain't human."
"What?"
"No," Gerald Janelle said. He smoothed down the lapels of a plaid jacket with sparkling epaulettes and adjusted the complimenting rabbinical-looking hat. "You think a human could ever be so talented?"
"Come to think of it, she is pretty out of this world."
"Literally," Gerald Janelle said with a flip of her braids. "Miss Monáe is from a planetary system that originated out of the Carina Nebula. No one is quite sure how she ended up here, but she's a bit of a cause celeb among us supernaturals. A real fish out of water, diamond in the rough type story."
"Does Janelle know this?"
"That she is a lost child of the Carina Nebula, or a favorite among demons, demigods, and angels alike?"
"Both."
Gerald Janelle touched her chin. Liam felt charmed by her elven appearance. He had to remind himself it wasn't actually her before he went full-on fanboy. "Come to think of it, no," Gerald Janelle said. "Her species does have a significant resemblance to humans. Maybe she will figure it out eventually, when her latent powers emerge."
"Latent powers?"
"Telepathy, telekinesis, the ability to shoot plasma, lightning from her eyes and fingertips, teleportation, all the good stuff. She could rule the world, literally. You all should be so lucky." Liam had so many questions. His head was spinning with possibilities, but his train of thought was interrupted by a crashing noise. It came from behind the door leading to one of the stairwells, one of the secret stairwells in his lab. Liam's father had built stairways long ago as a covert means for Liam's mother to visit him from her dorm room on the 3rd level of Lambeth House. Ian's proximity alarm sounded. Liam was already darting across the workshop, but Gerald Janelle was way ahead of him. She had transformed into the black and red leather armor from the Janelle Monáe Grimes collab video of Venus Flytrap, complete with flaming sword. Gerald Janelle alighted next to the waist-high panel set into the wainscoting of the laboratory wall. The hidden door there swung open, and a teenage boy tumbled out with an oof. He was wide-eyed, blanched to a pale shade of white, and trembling. In a blink, Gerald Janelle had the boy's collar clutched in her hand. Raising the fiery sword just short of his face, he said, "It seems we're not alone." The kid, perhaps a year or two younger than Liam, swallowed hard, his eyes shut tightly as the point of the sword pressed into the soft flesh of his neck. Gerald Janelle turned to Liam. "Should I kill him?" Chapter 3. Mitchell Winskell.
"Please don't kill me! I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop," the kid cried. "No one is killing anyone," Liam shouted, more to Gerald Janelle wielding her flaming sword than to their intruder. Fine, fine, Gerald Janelle said, lowering her sword, but not before feinting a lurch in the kid's direction. He flinched and let out a weak, eep! Gerald, I imagine murdering a kid probably wouldn't help you on the karmic balance scorecard. I suppose, Gerald Janelle said, sheathing the sword. Still, he crossed her arms and directed a threatening glare at the kid. The kid looked harmless enough, though. He was undersized, freckled, and had a bush of unruly auburn hair flaring out in all directions, a la Albert Einstein. His glasses had tumbled off when he had fallen out of the stairwell. Liam picked them up and handed them to him. The kid mumbled a soft but sincere, "Thanks." Once he put them on, the lenses accentuated his blinking blue eyes, one pupil a bit more dilated than the other. Liam couldn't help but notice the kid's t-shirt. It was black. In fluorescent green lettering that looked as if it would glow in the dark, it read, "Come to the nerd side. We have pie." "Who are you? And what were you doing in my stairwell?" Liam asked. I'm Mitchell Winskell, room 303. I was hanging a new poster of the periodic table, one with the lanthanoids and actinoids incorporated into the full table and not set down at the bottom like on all those other tables. But it's wider than standard tables, and it was bumping up against the air vent, and when I went to smooth it down, the vent opened like a door, and I found this stairwell, and I heard voices, and so I followed. But it was dark in there, and I kind of tumbled down the last few stairs. Gerald Janelle looked over to Liam, her hand on the sword hilt. Liam sighed. 303 was my mother's room. A facial recognition scan, cross-referenced with university records and social media, confirms that he is indeed Mitchell Terrence Winskell, age 13, a first-year student attending the university under a Running Start scholarship, Ian announced. 13? That seems young for a university, Gerald Janelle said. No, not here. Grand Old Republic University has special Running Start scholarships for young genius kids who graduate high school early and qualify for college, Liam explained. Lambeth House is full of them, as the administration figured it wasn't a great idea to house a bunch of awkward underage kids with the 18 and ups in the regular dorms. Gerald Janelle stuck out her lower lip and held her chin. Wise. Liam turned back to Mitchell. How much did you hear? Well, I heard the word psychopomp and was intrigued. Psychopomp? You did more than just tumble down the last few stairs, Liam said. The sound carried up the stairwell. I could hear your voices clearly once I was inside. Gerald Janelle transformed into Tessa Thompson in her Men in Black role, complete with memory wipe stick with a glowing red end. Should I wipe his memory? Gerald Tessa asked. Liam took a moment before he replied, trying to adjust to the celebrity reshuffle. You can do that? Gerald Tessa shrugged. I don't know. We can find out. No, please, I won't tell anyone, Mitchell pleaded. I really liked you in Avengers and the Thor movies as Valkyrie. Annihilation, too. It's not really Tessa Thompson. Liam helped Mitchell up, elbowing Gerald Tessa out of the way. No one is killing anyone, and no one is wiping anyone else's memory, he added. Liam was actually relieved to have a second flesh-and-blood person to corroborate the weirdness that had infiltrated his workshop. I'm Liam, that's Gerald, when he's not Janelle Monáe or Tessa Thompson. Gerald snapped back into his demon form and gave a short bow. I'm Mitchell, but my friends and family call me Mitch, Mitchell said redundantly, adjusting his glasses to get a closer look at Gerald. All right, so, Mitchell, you see him too. Who? Him, her, it, the shape-shifting thing floating in my workshop. Liam waved a hand at Gerald, who flashed what was likely meant to be a friendly, photogenic smile. It mostly looked hideous. Is this a trick question? Am I supposed to say no? Mitchell asked, giving a conspicuous wink. No, I need to know. I'm not worried about you letting the secret out. No one would believe you anyway. I just need to know if I'm going mad or not. Oh, you're not. I definitely see him too, or see her, or it's, what are your pronouns? He, him, his are fine, Gerald answered quickly, more versed in contemporary gender politics than Liam. Okay, thanks.
Mitchell said, growing comfortable. Well, I definitely see him. So either we're experiencing a shared hallucination or a simultaneous psychotic break, both of which would be highly improbable events. I'll note that as a simple yes, Liam said, turning and crossing back to his swivel chair, which he dropped into with a bump, throwing his leg up over one of the arms. Mitchell followed in slow steps, his eyes roving around the laboratory. That is a nice mass spectrometer. Is that an RNA quantification array? Yes, Liam said, rubbing his temples with his thumb and forefinger. Is it de rigueur to have so many secret passages in a building? Gerald asked, flapping over as Mitchell examined a tray of wrenches Liam had left out, next to the innards of an LCD display he was refurbishing. No, my father built them when he and my mother lived here. Your parents lived in Lambeth House? Mitchell asked. His neck craned backward as he took in the denatured alcohol-powered projectile cannon fashioned out of tennis ball cans and PVC pipe. It was one of Liam's side projects. Yeah, we all did, Liam said, his jaw flexing at the mere mention of his parents. When he realized both Gerald and Mitchell were looking at him, waiting for further explanation, he relented. Mom was a grad student. Dad was a handyman groundskeeper for the university, just as his dad had been before him. It's a job that's been handed down through my family for, well, I guess as long as anyone remembers. And he and your mom met and fell in love? Mitchell adjusted his glasses. I guess. She was working on her PhD, and he had been auditing classes in all sorts of subjects for years, a perk of being an GORU employee. But Lambeth is one of the historical buildings. It's as old as the university. How did your father get permission from the Board of Regents to make upgrades? He didn't, Liam said, adding, screw them. Oh, Mitchell said awkwardly. Liam got the sense Mitchell wasn't much of a rule breaker. I detect some resentment, Gerald said in a Viennese accent that Liam imagined was supposed to be an approximation of Sigmund Freud. The Board of Regents are a bunch of stuffed shirts who care more about tradition than their students. Mom was diagnosed with sickle cell in her 20s when she was working here as a postdoc, but the Board of Regents wouldn't even approve a window AC for her because it compromised the historical character of Lambeth House. So Pop took things into his own hands. You mean my room has AC? I thought that vent was just for show, Mitchell said. This building has a ton of features people don't know about. Thanks to Dad. That is so cool. I can't wait to tell my cousin Jeannie. They're so strict about this building. Jeannie is always fighting with the RA about what she can and can't put on her walls. But come to look at it, your workshop is on point. State of the art. Your dad is more than a handyman groundskeeper. Was, Liam said, his eyes drifting toward the dark matter array sitting in its trombone case. Was. Oh, sorry, Mitchell said, catching Liam's meaning. And Mom's gone too, before you ask, Liam said. He got up, kicking the chair so that it rolled away and banged into his desk. His hands were fidgety. He picked up a flathead screwdriver and began tinkering with the LCD display. Mitchell drew out a stool from the workbench and sat down. Well, I've certainly seen you around on that bamboo bike of yours, Mitchell said. I figured you lived around here, but I never realized you were in the same building. Are you a student? Not officially, but I sit in on any classes I want to. Liam picked up a Phillips head to remove a circuit board from the LCD, just like Dad did. So you're a non-traditional student, but not a running start student. You seem pretty nosy for a kid who I just caught breaking into my lab, Liam snapped. Mitchell went quiet. Liam looked up in the beat of silence that followed and noticed Gerald sitting cross-legged on the counter. What are you looking at? Just listening, Gerald said, his hands palms out, his nails clacking against one another. Maybe this was all in the binder you forgot to read, Liam said, jabbing the circuit board. I'm sorry about your parents, Mitchell offered, his voice low. I should be asking you questions. You eavesdropped on me. You barged into my workshop, Liam said. It was a throwaway statement, but Mitchell interpreted it as a full-on invitation to share his life story. I'm a first year. I graduated high school last year. I'm a sociology-psychology double major with a double minor in fields of physics. I'd like to do my PhD on the work of James Coleman, who originally examined how adolescent peer groups self-organize into nerds, jocks, leading crowd, and burnouts, and how these groups have further diversified and stratified in the 50 years since. Eckert, Everhart, and Foley have done a lot of research into how there are as many as 12 groups these days, including new ones such as floaters, goodettes, fine arts, normals, and loners most likely to become mass shooters. These groups have further stratified, differentiated, and have cross-sections with other identity groupings, such as ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and religious affiliation. It's all so fascinating.
Yup, Mitchell is definitely graduate school material, Liam thought. Liam knew enough from growing up on a university campus not to ask a PhD student or wannabe PhD student about their focus of study, unless you had lots of time to kill and or an escape plan. But now, stuck in his own lab, which was usually his sanctuary from the outside world, Liam was feeling crowded and imposed upon. Okay, I didn't ask for a frickin' dissertation defense, Liam said, tossing down a set of Allen keys and swapping them out for a set of pliers. Actually, after all this talk, I'm still wondering why you and Gerald, spawn of Satan or whatever, are still in my laboratory.
Excuse me, but I'm no spawn of Lucifer, Gerald corrected.
Whatever, but now that I know I'm not crazy, you've served your purpose. Liam pointed his pliers at Mitchell, hoping he'd pick up on the clue to leave.
Oh, okay.
The hurt on Mitchell's face was immediate. Of all the teenage cliques just mentioned, Liam knew exactly which marginal ones Mitchell fit into. Scrawny, smart, and overly enthusiastic, Mitchell definitely had been a target for bullies his whole life. Liam knew what that was like. Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound so harsh. Tell me more about your crowds.
Well, sure, Mitchell said, recovering. I'm curious about how people self-identify and self-select and the social costs and benefits for each choice. Like you, for instance. You clearly have qualities of a brain, maybe even a good-at, which has benefits like academic success and access to advanced classes and scholarships, but you clearly lean toward, loner status, which also has its benefits, such as freedom from social obligations.
Liam looked sideways at Mitchell. But,
well, it does have its costs, such as a self-perpetuating cycle of social isolation.
Maybe social isolation is a benefit, Liam said, feeling defensive again. He twisted a wire cap on the circuit board.
I don't know if it turned out that way for Adam Lanza, James Holmes, or Jared Loeffner.
Liam's grip around the pliers tightened so that his knuckles turned white. You're a bit socially awkward yourself, Mitchell, if you ask me. Mitchell rephrased, ignoring the critique, as it did have the quality of being true.
But you have a lot going for you, Liam. You do, such as your ethnicity.
It was an objective statement of fact, and maybe something Mitchell, as a white kid, could speak about in a detached, impersonal fashion. But race was always personal to Liam, not abstract. My ethnicity, Liam said, his face beginning to feel hot. His mixed heritage had never felt like an asset, ever, and he was not at all thrilled at the prospect of a white kid offering him insight on his racial identity. Liam's irritability manifested as a growing vibration in his chest.
Sure, Mitchell said, plowing ahead. 97% of mass shooters are white males, so you are definitely not in that category.
Liam wasn't sure if he should laugh or throw a wrench at Mitchell. Gerald was still seated on the edge of the desk, his elbows on his knees, his head perched on his palms, his ears pointed at the two of them. You enjoying this? Liam asked the demon.
Immeasurably so.
Figures. Liam rolled his eyes.
But you could totally be a floater too, Liam. I could see you moving among the groups, the brains, the good-ats, the normals, even jocks. I mean, you must be in good shape to bike all around campus.
Yeah, Liam said, feeling exposed but not sure why.
You should totally come climbing with me, my cousin Jeannie, and our friends at the rec center. You'd like Jeannie. She's mixed race too, from Trinidad and Tobago, half black and half Southeast Asian.
This caught Liam up short. Mitchell's cousin, black? He considered Mitchell's white-as-milk complexion. Mitchell anticipated Liam's question before he voiced it. We're a diverse family, just like yours. You shouldn't be surprised. 15% of marriages in the U.S. now are interracial, just like your parents. Why do you keep bringing up my family? Liam said, slamming the pliers on the tool tray. The clatter made Mitchell jump. Even Gerald's eyes widened. What? Liam glared over at the demon. Well, your situation is interesting, the demon said. Yeah, like I'm some specimen in a jar. Look at the little quirky mixed-race orphan who is a ward of the university. Let's do a case study. Categorize him. Make him part of a longitudinal study and take bets on whether or not he becomes a successful scientist or a school shooter. Liam's irritation grew into full-on anger. It came with a suddenness that surprised even him. What do any of you want? Why are you in my lab? I just want to be left the frick alone. No one said a word. Liam paced around the counter, pulling open drawers and slamming them to find a better set of pliers. Sorry, Mitchell and Gerald said at once, looking at one another. Perhaps because he was older by a few millennia, Gerald took up the initiative to speak first and resolve what was becoming a very uncomfortable situation. Well, as your dutiful assistant, I serve at your pleasure, Gerald said. The demon had shifted to a subdued formality. Liam wasn't sure he liked his professional tone any more than the previous ones. If you wish for solitude, I can accommodate you, Gerald continued. Simply call my name out 3 times, and I shall return with alacrity. Yes, that would be great, Liam said, leaning into the counter, staring into the tool drawer, his eyes unfocused. Granted. There was a pop that Liam imagined was the air closing in on the vacuum left in the wake of Gerald's disappearance. He didn't bother to look up to check his hypothesis. He was engrossed in the wrenches, pliers, and drill bits displayed before him by increasing intervals of size, 1/8, 1/4, 3/8, and so on. Polished, gleaming, each item separated from the next by a uniform amount of space, and there was something reassuring about the order and spacing of everything being in its proper place. It was how Liam preferred his lab and his life. I guess I'll be going too, Mitchell said, nearly swallowing his words. I'll see you later. Yeah, was all Liam said, not looking up. He started to run his fingers over the wrenches, their surfaces smooth and cold to the touch. He listened as Mitchell hopped off his stool and crossed the lab. Liam tracked him by the sound of his footsteps and the soft squeak of the hinges of the staircase door. Liam made a mental note to lock it once Mitchell was gone. But right before the door closed, Mitchell spoke up, that breathless enthusiasm resurfacing. You know, Liam, that offer of wall climbing still stands. I think you'd like hanging with us. My cousin Jeannie and her friends are pretty cool, you know, for nerds and all that. Yeah, sure, whatever. Thanks, Mitchell. Bye, Mitchell. Mitchell took the hint. Liam waited, letting out a long, relieved sigh when the door finally closed. He was, once again, thankfully, alone.